Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we got another news and rumor video to discuss. In today's video, we're talking about some signings, including a massive one in Edmonton. We're also talking about some trade rumors involving the Jackets, Canadiens, Maple Leafs, Kraken, Ducks, Blackhawks, and the Calgary Flames. We'll go to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Intent Hockey Channel. Before we get into this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for your support. We're able to help you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below and don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below so all discussed in this video. Now, before we begin all of the news and rumors and stuff like that to discuss here today, I do have a quick channel update. I am moving in the not too distant future, so I just want to let you guys know that some things are going to be changing. I'm not going to go into much detail here just for personal reasons, but I am moving from the province of BC to the province of Alberta, so it's going to be an interesting change. So this room, which I've done all of my videos in for the first 2 years of this YouTube channel, which you guys have been so supportive about, will be gone in just a couple of weeks. So just want to also let you guys know this because it might be a little bit of a transition period. So I'm not exactly sure how quickly I can get everything set up at the new place. So it might take me a couple of weeks. So my last scheduled video will be on Saturday or Sunday, the 14th or 15th of September. I'm then going to take about a week and a half off. And if there's something major that happens, I'll try and figure out some way to make a video. But for that time frame, probably won't make any sort of videos. I am going to have about 5 to 10 pre-recorded videos that I'm going to be putting out over that time frame. And then hopefully at some point, either on September 24th or September 26th, I have enough set up in the new place that I can start recording videos again. So just to let you guys know, I am moving. This background won't be here anymore after the middle of September. Like I said, I'll have a couple of pre-recorded videos for you guys during the mid to late September, and hopefully by September 24th or September 26th, I can go back to doing regularly scheduled videos. Hopefully I'll be able to have something set up by that time to get you guys all the news on training camp and the start of the season. So let you guys thoughts on that, but I am going to be moving. It's going to be a change, so interesting note there. And I'm going to get started with my video here today. So we're going to start today's video off by once again looking at some signings, PTO updates from over the past couple of days. We have had 2 signings, one small one extremely big one. First, Utah HC has strengthened their blue line, and they have picked up a nice addition in free agency by signing defenseman Robert Bortuzzo to a 1-year league minimum deal. So that's a pretty good deal in my opinion for the Blues. Bortuzzo last year started out in St. Louis, played 4 games, was really faltering out of their lineup, and the Blues had a really deep blue line as well. So they wound up moving him for a 7th round pick to New York Islanders. He wound up playing 23 games with the Islanders, put up no points. Didn't do overly bad, but still wasn't overly great for the New York Islanders and was a healthy scratch on most occasions. So with the depth on the defense now for the Utah franchise, I wouldn't expect him to be an everyday NHLer. I think there's a very likely chance he could even be placed on waivers with their depth on the defense. But I do think he's going to be a decent addition for the Utah club. If there's some injuries, he can be a serviceable third pair defenseman. So it's a pretty good pickup there for Utah, and one of the top defensemen on the board left, and Robert Bortuzzo has been taken off. So it's a pretty good pickup there for the hockey club. And then we also saw a massive extension just before I started recording this video, and it is with Leon Draisaitl and the Edmonton Oilers. We talked about how there's a very likely chance Draisaitl and the Oilers come together on some sort of a long-term deal. There were some rumors that was going to happen in the not too distant future. It has indeed happened. Leon Draisaitl signs an 8-year extension that'll begin at the start of next year with an AAV of $14 million, making him, as it sits right now, as of next year, the highest paid player in the NHL. I wasn't surprised by that. I thought Draisaitl was going to get at least 12, if not close to Matthews at 13.25, and as of next year, he will be the highest paid player in the NHL, probably to be surpassed by McDavid the year after. So interesting note there. Draisaitl is coming off 3 straight 100-point seasons and hit 84 points during the shortened season. He's one of the best NHLers in the NHL right now. He's coming off a season where he had 41 goals and 106 points in 81 games, which is actually a little bit of a down year for him. The year prior to that, he had 52 goals and 128 points. The year prior to that, he had 55 goals and 110 points. So he had a little bit of a down year last year, but still was a really productive player and a really good monster on that Edmonton Oilers team. So full of money, that's like $112 million and something like that. So this is a massive contract for the Oilers, a massive contract for Draisaitl, and they have their cap situation worked out a little bit more for the future. With with the $14 million now on the books for next year. I think they have about $76 to $77 million tied up in cap space now. So they're going to have, as long as it goes up by $5 million next year, the cap does, between like I think $12 and $13 million in cap space, something like that for next year. And they still have to sign Evan Bouchard. So the Bouchard deal is going to be able to depend on how much more the Oilers can do next offseason, but this is a massive deal and a good deal for the Oilers. I mean, Draisaitl deserves to be the highest paid player. He's a fantastic forward. He's a fantastic NHL player, and I wasn't overly surprised that he's going to be surpassing Matthews next year as the highest paid NHL player. So interesting to note there. We also have a couple of other interesting pieces of news. First, on the PTO side of things, former Blackhawk, former Tampa Bay Lightning player T.Johnson is signing another Atlantic Division team, and that's the Boston Bruins on a PTO. So no guarantees Johnson makes the team, but we know that the Bruins could definitely use some more depth on their forward group. We talked about Wahlstrom in the last little bit. Johnson, I think, could also fit that sort of a bill. He's a versatile player, can play wing, can play center. He's a more of a veteran type guy, but he can play on the fourth line, play on the third line, put up some points on a cheaper deal. He could be a really good ad there for the Bruins. So they get him on a PTO, and we shall see if he's able to get a new deal with the Boston Bruins. And also, we've got some other updates regarding Filip Zadina. We know there was some talk, we talked about a little while ago, that Zadina might be signing a new deal in the NHL. Kevin Weeks said that there was at least 3 teams interested. Zadina has actually decided to take his talents elsewhere, overseas, as he signed a 2-year deal over in the National League. So interesting to note there. I'm a little bit surprised he didn't get an NHL opportunity with an NHL team, but still, that's a pretty good pickup there for Zadina as he's going overseas to pursue his options over in Europe. So interesting to note there. But those are some interesting things that happened from our past couple of days. We saw Bortuzzo sign a new deal in Utah. We saw Edmonton sign a massive extension for Draisaitl. We saw Tyler Johnson get a PTO with Boston, and Filip Zadina is going overseas to play in Europe. So interesting to note there. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. We're going to start here with the Anaheim Ducks and Chicago Blackhawks. Now, I recently read an article talking about the Anaheim Ducks potentially making a deal with the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, it might not be during this offseason. It might be sometime in season, or potentially even most likely at next year's offseason. But there was an article out there mentioning that the Blackhawks, to try and improve their team for the future, could try and look to target a guy like Trevor Zegras. Now, I know the Hawks had a pretty productive offseason so far this year, adding Trevor, adding Bertuzzi, getting Brossois in net, adding Martinez and Brody on the back end. They did really good. They're still not anywhere close, in my opinion, to competing for a playoff spot, but I think an addition of Zegras won't help them this year, but could help them maybe as early as next year, potentially the year after. Why not making the playoffs? The Hawks team could be lethal if they were to add a guy like Zegras. Zegras has this year plus next year in his contract, I think 5.25. It's not overly expensive. Zegras is a fantastic playmaking forward, could work really well with a sniper like a Bedard. That duo could eventually both hit like 100 points, both play on the same line. Bedard could hit like 60 goals, so that could be a really good, interesting duo there. Now, the Hawks have enough assets to pull it off? For sure. The Hawks have plenty of assets. I think they have 2 first-round picks this year, including Toronto's first-round pick. They have a couple of second-round picks. They even have a couple more picks down the road, so I think if there was some sort of a package, like maybe the Hawks moved the Leafs first-round pick, maybe a prospect or 2, like I've heard Lucas Reichel's name be mentioned. Could look at one of their recent picks, like maybe Marek Vanacker, who was recently drafted, Oliver Moore, something like that, like a really good prospect. Maybe they move another forward or a defenseman who's already in the NHL. Like, could they move a guy like Connor Murphy? That could be a possibility, or an Andrea Anthony. I think the Hawks have enough pieces there, even with them still rebuilding, to potentially make that sort of a move. And if there was to get them a really good upgrade, like a Trevor Zegras, I don't see why they wouldn't do that. So we're going to have to wait and see. It's not any guarantee that these 2 teams are even talking right now. It was just something that was speculated, but I could see Zegras be a really good fit in the Blackhawks organization. And I think the Hawks have enough assets to pull off that sort of a deal with the Anaheim Ducks. So it's going to be interesting to see, but we're going to have to wait and see if that's a potential trade that could happen in the not distant future. Next, going over to the Montreal Canadiens and Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, recently we just talked about the sad news regarding Johnny Gaudreau in our last video about him unfortunately passing away. It's really hard news to still take. But when it comes to the business side of that bad accident, Johnny Gaudreau had a $9.75 million cap hit. So with him unfortunately passing away, that $9.75 million cap hit is now gone. So with that in mind, the Jackets are now under the salary cap floor. So they're currently not cap compliant right now. Now, the NHL might make them some sort of a exemption or something like that, given the surprising circumstances. But I think there's a possibility that the Jackets may have to try and acquire some more cap to get back above the cap floor. And on top of that, with the loss of Gaudreau and the passing passing of Gaudreau, they also lose a very talented and skilled top six forward. So that's led some people to think, is there a possibility that the Jackets could try and help some teams out who are in tight cap situations, like we were talking about with Calgary in our last video, and try and add some more cap before the season starts? It's possible, and the team that seems to be heavily linked to the Jackets right now is Montreal. We know the Habs are seriously looking at trying to move some cap off their roster. They've been talking about Dvorak, there's been talk about Armia, Gallagher, Anderson. So could any one of those four guys wind up heading to Columbus? I think it's possible. Dvorak's only got 1 year left, so does Armia. So if one of those two guys were to be acquired, they could both be solid bottom six forwards in Columbus and be decent additions there. Meanwhile, Anderson and Gallagher, I think have either 3 or 4 years left. Anderson's making 5.5, Gallagher's making 6.5. So it wouldn't be easier to take those guys on. They would probably have to attach some sort of a sweetener. But I do think that could be a deal that works. I mean, the Jackets, like we just said, have a lot of cap space. Anderson's even from Columbus. They recently, I think it was a couple of years ago, made a trade. Domi went to Columbus. Anderson went to Montreal. Deal never really worked out for either side. Domi's now in Toronto. Anderson's now playing like third, fourth line minutes in Montreal. So I think a fresh start for Anderson could really help him. Could he go back to Columbus where he had some of his better seasons? I think it's possible. I think more likely it would be like a Dvorak or an Armia going to Columbus and that sort of a deal. So we'd have to wait and see. But with the Jackets now under the cap floor due to the passing of Gaudreau, there's a very likely chance that they're going to have to pick up some sort of a cap hit to try and get themselves back above the cap floor. And Montreal's a very likely team that makes that sort of move with the Blue Jackets. On top of that, there's a couple of other teams who could definitely make that sort of move there with them. Like another team that comes to mind is the Islanders, who are trying to clear cap space. Could they move a guy like Jean-Gabriel Pageau or Anders Lee to the Jackets? Those two both only have 2 years left on their deal. I think that's another possibility. So we're going to have to wait and see exactly what happens there. But the Jackets are a team that I could see other teams targeting who have bad contracts to try and move them to the Blue Jackets organization. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. On top of that, we've also got a couple of other pieces of news here to talk about. First, with the Seattle Kraken and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, this is no speculation, no rumors or anything regarding these two teams. This is purely my speculation, but I was recently looking at teams who could maybe take on a guy like Brandon Tanev, who's in the final year of his deal, making $3.5 million, and could get Seattle out of their tight cap situation. And it occurred to me that he may be able to go to a team that already has his brother. And could Brandon Tanev go to Toronto to meet up with Chris Tanev, and could those two play together next year? I think it's a possibility. Now, like I said, this is just my speculation, but I was trying to figure out some way that the Leafs could pull that deal off, and then it dawned on me the Leafs could also use another top four right shot defenseman, and the Kraken do have a guy entering the final year of his deal who's in a top four right shot defenseman position. That's Adam Larsson. So could there be some sort of a deal to still be had before the season starts between the Kraken and the Leafs that could give the Toronto Maple Leafs both Brandon Tanev and Adam Larsson from Seattle? I think it's a possibility. Now, I think one of those two, most likely Adam Larsson, would have to have 50% of his contract retained, which is a Kraken can do. So that'll be able to bump his cap hit down. I think it was to be around like $5.5 million. So that's still way too much than the Leafs would have right now. They would still need to clear around $4.6 million off their cap to try and make this sort of a deal work. And there are a couple of ways they can do this. One, I think a returning package would have to include a guy like Timothy Liljegren. Liljegren sort of fell out of favor in Toronto. There's been talk about him being dealt all season long. So I think there's a possibility out there that we could see Liljegren be moved in a package that could get them a guy like Larsson and Tanev. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But I think Liljegren would be a part of a package. And I think they'd also have to move either Calle Jarnkrok or Nick Robertson as another part. I think they could potentially wiggle their way around if they were to move Robertson, because I think there's a very likely chance that if they moved Robertson, Robertson signs like a 1 to 2 year deal at like $1.5 to $2.5 million in Seattle. That could be really a pickup there for the Kraken. Jarnkrok, not as good as Robertson, but still his cap hit would be able to sort of level out the cap hits for both of these teams. So it'll be an interesting swap. I think the Leafs will also have to include a draft pick of like either a second round pick or a third round pick, or maybe a young prospect or something like that. But I mean, if the Leafs were able to acquire Adam Larsson, imagine if having a top four that has Chris Tanev, Morgan Rielly, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and Adam Larsson. That would be a fantastic top four for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So not saying it's a guarantee that this sort of a deal happens for the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Seattle Kraken, but it's an interesting concept in my opinion. Could the Leafs acquire Tanev and Adam Larsson for some sort of package of like a Timothy Liljegren, a Jarnkrok or a Robertson, and then a nice draft pick or a prospect? I think that could work for both sides. It'll give the Kraken a little bit more flexible cap situation, and it will give them a young forward Jordan Robertson or a decent forward in Yarncroke, who's already been in Seattle before. It would give them a solid young defenseman in Liljegren, and it'll give them another asset. And for the Leafs, so it'll reunite the Tanev brothers, and Tanev could be a really solid bomb 6 forward for them, and it'll give them a solid top 4 right shot defenseman in Adam Larsson. So, in my opinion, that could work out for both sides. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts, what you think of this potential deal, at least in my opinion, down in the comment section below. And lastly, talking about the Calgary Flames, Dave Pagnotta was on the NHL Network again recently, and he mentions that the Calgary Flames are open for business and to expect a teardown in the not too distant future. It seems that the Calgary Flames are going to be the next team is going to go through the bare bones rebuild. He says that, according to his sources, he's saying that as long as you are ready to try and make some sort of a deal, the Flames are willing to listen and are open to making any sort of deal. He says that Kadri's the name who's back on the trade block. He says that the Flames are really willing to move on from Nazem Kadri. He says Kadri, for the right situation, is willing to waive his no movement clause, most likely to go to the east, somewhere around the Toronto area. So my guess would be he'd be most open to going to a team like Detroit, Montreal, Buffalo, maybe some of the New York teams, Boston, somewhere around there would be my guess as to where Kadri would be most willing to go. So it'd be interesting to note there, but he does say that Kadri is available. We all know that Rasmus Anderson's available. He says that there's a very likely chance this is the last season for Rasmus Anderson in a Calgary Flame jersey. Very likely chance he gets moved at some point in season. On top of that, he did mention that the Flames are also open to moving Mackenzie Weegar or Jonathan Huberdeau. Now, these two are mega deals on long-term deals. Huberdeau, I think, has 6 years left or 7 years left on his contract at $10.5 million. So, as much as I think they would want to move on from Huberdeau, I don't think they really can at this point unless they retain some money. For Weegar, it's a little bit of a different story. As much as I think Weegar could be a trade chip, I think most likely he could easily stay too. He's been a really good fit there in Calgary. Apparently, didn't even know this, but before the Blues went and targeted Broberg via the offer sheet, they apparently targeted Calgary's Mackenzie Weegar and tried to make some sort of a deal to acquire him, to add him to their blue line. So the Blues never landed Weegar, but they obviously had some serious interest in him. So could Weegar be moved? I think there would be a ton of teams who had interest in Weegar. I just don't think at this point in time Calgary would want to move him unless they got some sort of a fantastic package. Like I said, I think Huberdeau's basically untradeable right now, but this team has a lot of pending UFAs or players who are on like 2 to 3 year deals, so they don't have a whole bunch of players who are signed for beyond 3 years. The only guys I think are Sharon Govich, who's not going anywhere. He's going to be with that team for the next couple of years. Like we said, Huberdeau, Kadri, and Weegar. I think those are the only guys who are signed for beyond 3 years. So if they're willing to move guys like Kadri and Weegar, who I think are tradable right now, and Huberdeau, who's not even tradable at this point, I think this team's going to go through a completely bare bone rebuild, and they're going to go and tear everything down. So I think there's a very likely chance this trade deadline for the Calgary Flames is going to be a busy one. I think Anderson could be moved, Kuzmenko, Mantha, who recently just signed a 1-year deal, probably a couple of other guys. I wouldn't be surprised if Kadri is a potential trade chip for the Flames. So we're going to have to wait and see exactly what happens there, but David Pagnotta, according to his sources, says that the Flames are going to go through a teardown, and there's a very likely chance that they are open for business and willing to move a lot of guys, including guys like Kadri, Anderson, Weegar, and Huberdeau. So that's interesting to note there, and this is going to be a team that we're going to have to watch out for through the entirety of the season. So it's going to be interesting to note there, but Flames seem to be open for business, so we're going to have to wait and see who they could potentially move. But that's what I'm talking for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. What do you think about the Flames? Could they move a lot of pieces, and if so, what sort of pieces do they move, and do they go through a complete rebuild? Could the Kraken at least hook up on a deal regarding Tanev and Larsson? If so, could that be the sort of deal that happens for those two sides? Could the Jackets take on a contract, and if so, could they help the Habs with one of Dvorak or Armia or Gallagher or Anderson? Definitely have to get your thoughts on that. Plus, what do you think about potentially Zegras going to the Chicago Blackhawks? Definitely have to get your thoughts on all of that. Plus, what do you think about Draisaitl, Bortuzzo, Johnson, and Zadina? That's all I'm going to talk for today. I'm going to like this video. If you're like to subscribe down below. Thank you for your support. We're able to help you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't leave a comment down in the comment section below so I can also discuss today's video. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis. So for that, so check that out. Leave a link in the description below. And come to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.